Supplements. Are they a magic bullet for weight loss and better health? Let's find out. Hey, I'm Mike,
And I'm Twing.
and welcome to another episode of 40 Plus Fit, the podcast where we unpack the science of sustainable weight loss and fitness for those over 40. Whether you're just starting out your fitness journey or you're a seasoned pro, understanding supplements can be a game changer. As usual, we are joined by our head coach, Twain, to provide us with all the info we need. So grab your favorite beverage and let's get started. Supplements, Twain. Supplements.
Supplements, man. It's a booming industry. I
So
think it's like what, almost definitely multi-billion dollar, maybe $1 trillion industry at this point.
And it's so well marketed, right? Everywhere you go, no matter
Mm,
what you're doing, you just see supplements pushed for everything.
yes. Let me just do a quick check here. We probably should have done that before this, right? By 2031, the value of just US dietary supplement market is expected to exceed 70 billion. Yeah.
That's just the US
That,
market.
that's
That's not
the
it.
that's just the US market itself.
My
So
goodness.
the global supplement market is valued at 177.5 billion USD last year. So I'm pretty sure it's just going to go
100.
up and up and up. I mean, that's the whole promise, right? Because supplements are supposedly this thing where, the marketing has gotten really out of hand. And there's all these wonderful images that they conjure up, all these promises that they make of the things that are going to be achieved just by taking these supplements. And I think it plays into the human need for having like a very nicely packaged and easy and convenient solution to whatever problems we have. Don't you think?
That's true. And because we live in this what we call a microwave generation now, right? There's no more slow cooking, no more putting in the long-term work. We want things, we want it
Oh
now.
yeah.
And so when these supplements are nowadays, when they're marketing to people, it's like, okay, this is as we said in the intro, the magic bullet. You don't need to
Yeah.
do the hard work anymore. Just take the supplement and boom, there you go. So
Yeah, man.
so, perhaps when getting started here, I think a good foundation would be is when we can actually define, in simple terms, what are supplements?
Yeah. A supplement, I mean, in and of itself, the name is relatively self-explanatory, right? A supplement is something that either adds an extra element or amount to a thing, or it completes or it enhances something else when it's added to it. So by that virtue already, a supplement is not something that you just take to replace something else completely.
Hmm.
You need something first to which you add a supplement to further enhance whatever results you're getting. In the context of what we're talking about today with regards to nutritional supplements, yeah, that's something that we always tell clients, hey, the supplement is literally that top 1 to 5% of the pyramid, but it's also the most marketed 1 to 5% of the pyramid. So everybody focuses on that, but you're not getting the amount of return. But it also doesn't seem like the cost is very high for a lot of people because as expensive as supplements can be, the cost of like taking them is actually does not very tangible, right? Like you pay a lot of money for it, but it's so
Hmm.
easy to take. So I
Hmm.
think I think it just feels like, oh, this thing doesn't cost me a lot. But if you think about it, like a lot of the supplements that you take, probably do not have very much of a real meaningful effect. And that's also not to even talk about the point where the supplement industry itself is not heavily regulated. So a lot of times what is said to be on the label of the supplements that you buy, oftentimes the dosing and stuff could even be completely off.
Oh.
Um, and yeah, there are even websites that are third-party websites or supposed to be third-party websites, like Labdoor, Consumer Lab.
Hmm.
They take supplements and what they do is they do run them through a lab analysis to see what's the breakdown of the like one capsule of it or one serving of it, whatever it is, and then use that to reference back against the label and see whether or not it actually matches the label or is close enough to the label and to what degree it is. And then they rate it usually upon a scale, like a report card, if you will,
Yeah.
an A plus supplement or a B or a C or a D. And you find that there are so many brands that end up being like a C or a D where the values of the things that they say they're going to have in them can be as different as like 30-40% difference.
My goodness. But it's like you
Yeah.
say, there's no real authority overseeing
Yeah.
this to ensure
Yeah.
that the accuracy is there. So that would
Yeah.
lead us like what is the difference then between supplements and medication?
Yeah. And that's also another really cool thing to think about, right? Because medication is there's a certain standard to the way medication is produced so that there's an actual potency to the thing.
Yeah.
Right? But and the fact that supplements do not have that same degree of regulation indicates just how possibly ineffective most supplements tend to be in terms
Placebo
of having.
effect.
Yeah, right. I mean, a large portion of that is going to be placebo effect. I mean, there's certain supplements which we will talk about later, and this is Supplement 101, right? So
Yeah.
we'll talk about those later, the stuff that we recommend because they have a lot of research behind them to kind of enhance things. But I think the main thing is that a supplement is something that does not, that again enhances things, and it does not interfere very acutely with the processes or the processes or the systems in the body in the way that a medical kind of application would. So medications are meant to trigger certain systemic disruptions or systemic changes that, actually have a measurable effect.
All right.
I
So
think that's really the big difference between the two.
so would you say, like in layman's terms, would it be correct to say is that medication is for a focused issue, while supplements, as you said earlier, is something you add to, and only really 5% of the pyramid, where
Yeah.
medication would
Yeah.
be 90% of the pyramid for that particular issue that you're taking the medication for.
Yes, yes. I think that would be a decent way to put it. It might not be like completely correct, again, because of the level of nuance, but I
Hmm.
think that's a comparable enough analogy. Yeah.
Okay. So, like, when you're looking at supplements, then, um, why do you actually need them?
Mm. And I think this is a great question to ask because at the end of the day, it comes down to, again, what's the function of the supplement? Is to enhance and to add on to an already comprehensive, fairly comprehensive diet, right?
Hmm.
So for nutritional supplements, it's just filling in the gaps, a little bit of an insurance policy to make sure that you're getting all the vitamins and minerals, all that micronutrients that your body needs to function well, to go through all its metabolic processes, and to deal with all the stresses that you put on it on a day-to-day basis. So that's really why it's that little bit of extra insurance policy to make sure that you have enough,
It was like that top up, right?
abundance.
The
And
top up.
yeah, like a top up and an abundance, just to make sure your tank is topped up, if you will.
Okay. And I think it's also probably good to mention here is like when we're talking about supplements, we're not only speaking about, the most marketed supplements like protein and creatine and all that, but we also touching on
Not
things like
not
multivites.
Yeah, not just workout supplements.
Yeah.
We're talking about like actual health supplementation as well. Of course, again, this is such a Wild West kind of industry. People will sell like detox teas as supplements or like herbal supplements and all this kind of stuff or and supplements come in many forms as well. Like you go to traditional Chinese medicine, there's also like that supplementation as well, even though it uses medicine in the name. There's a lot of this kind of stuff, right? So it does encompass a very, very broad range. And I think supplements only come up as something that has been purely due to the marketing aspect of things, has come up as something that people automatically assume with either fitness itself or maybe even just like weight loss or weight
Mhm.
loss slash health, maybe benefits, something like this.
That's true. It's true. Because generally, like I would say, probably up until my early 30s, if you talk to me about supplements, I only think, oh, you want me to take protein powder, right? You want me to take creatine. You want me. That's the only idea and connection that I had with supplements. I never thought bigger than that and
Mm.
saw how all the different things actually play a part. But with that, what are some of the most used supplements that people over 40 should be looking at?
Um, Based and I'm gonna go through this list honestly just based on my experience with a large majority of people. But I also want to preface this by first saying that for a large majority of people, when we tackle the dietary aspect of things, and then we often see some improvement. So the first thing you should always do is go and get a blood check. Get some blood work done. A lot of supplementation is usually dependent on what your blood work looks like. Okay. And sometimes you can get even very specific tests done. For a lot of people over 40, especially women, I usually recommend, get some sort of a blood test done where they include tests like for vitamin D, for your magnesium levels, for your iron levels, and just use that as a way to inform like where your current levels are. And then you can take some supplementation and then compare that again 6 months later and see, the differences there. So first things first is find out where you're at in terms of the blood work before you even try to take any of this supplementation, okay? And then for a lot of the clients that we see, a large portion of them from just improving the diet and changing up some variety of the foods that they eat and including some things in, and replacing a lot more, especially a lot more fruit and veg back in. Honestly, a lot of the blood work just increases and improves straight away. Just even getting more base proteins in, improve certain markers already, and just getting more protein in already improves certain markers. So I think what I want to emphasize here is that supplements do not replace a very thorough, balanced diet. A diet that has a large variety of foods, has a good balance of the macronutrients, proteins, fats, carbs. Again, if you need to know more about that, listen back to the episodes we did on those. But yeah, supplements cannot replace that. Now, all that being said, look, some of the best or the most common ones, I wouldn't say best, that's always very hyperbolic, but some of the most common supplements that we see a lot of people take. First one, I would say is vitamin D. Yeah, so vitamin D is one of those where unless you're getting out in the sun a lot, I mean, I imagine in Southeast Asia, people get exposed to the sun quite a bit. But then again, a lot of times the people that I talk to tend to try to stay in the shade or they work in the office all day, right? So vitamin D is probably one of those that can be very beneficial for a lot of people. And then the other ones that I see a lot of people tend to take post 40, especially for women, is magnesium. So magnesium is one of those things that I think a lot of people do not get enough of. And again, it really depends kind of what are the types of foods that you tend to eat. Okay, because a lot of times a large portion of Asian food doesn't tend to have foods that contain a lot of very high in magnesium. So some examples of that would be, stuff like a lot of nuts, a lot of black beans specifically, general amount of like grains that are not rice. So these are not foods that we generally have a lot in our Asian cultures. So a lot of the ladies that I see tend to benefit a bit from some magnesium supplementation as well. Other than that, also there's the basic stuff like other basic stuff like just the what's it called, fish oils, where you get your omega-3 fatty acids, your EPA, DHA stuff. So fish oils are just one of those where again it depends on the individual. If you eat enough salmon, if you eat enough whitefish, cod, you're probably fine. But if you don't eat any fish at all, you probably want to supplement a bit with some fish oils just to get these healthy fats in. So these are pretty much some of the most common ones that I can think of. There's others like, extra calcium, extra iron, but those seem to be more on a per needs basis, just because you don't want to have too much excess of those kind of minerals floating around your blood. Yeah, so we don't want overcalcification. We don't want, excess iron in the blood. Yeah, so that's pretty much the list I can think of for now. What do you think, Mike? Does that sound about right?
I was going to ask, like, what about collagen? Because I see back in my home country, I didn't really hear of people taking this, but since living in Southeast Asia, I've noticed a lot of women over the age of 40 seem to be taking this in quite a bit of abundance.
Yeah, I do think this one's more to do with that beauty marketing perspective where a lot of times people, okay, so collagen is found kind of like to help with like skin hydration, elasticity, that's one of the things, right? So skin is obviously a big factor for beauty for a lot of people. Supposedly it helps enhance like, nail health and hair and stuff as well. Just because collagen is the protein that makes up a large part of the cell renewal for these parts of the body. The other part also actually is collagen actually does help a bit with like bone density too, together with calcium. But I think also it really depends because the research is still mixed. It's still quite mixed on, or it's not very conclusive on whether or not ingesting collagen as a collagen powder actually directly helps with these aspects. Just because a lot of the collagen itself might be reused for maybe even just like the gut repair itself already.
Mm.
So it never completely makes its way into the bloodstream in significant amounts to actually get transported to these other areas, So I don't know. I think the jury's still a bit out on that. I
Okay.
do think that I do think that uh I do think that it can be useful for like some of my clients that have digestive issues. We actually supplement with some collagen and they seem to get better. But then it's because they feel better, they start doing more positive stuff, like just general improvement in hydration, which seems to improve skin a lot better than
Yeah.
just taking collagen. Yeah, so it's just other peripheral things that happen. Um, we know once you get commit to taking maybe a supplement that could be could be the thing that's really causing the changes, not the supplement itself, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
The one person that I did speak to about it, she said that she takes it for her joints.
Yeah, so
Uh,
bones,
mm,
joints, like some of these structural tissues, the collagen does help with the replenishment of those.
okay. So back to your question you asked me is like, what do I think about these kind of things? I would go back to your point from that you made earlier. When you have all of these, I don't know if you can call them traditional kind of supplements and all this kind of like the Chinese TCM and all that. But
Yeah.
there's an issue that I struggled with for a while, and probably a bit not the best platform to come clean on this, but passing wind. I had a time where it's like if I go and I sit in front of the TV through one show, well, I probably let rip maybe about 7 or 8 times. And after a while,
I apologize in advance to those who are, eating while you're listening to this. Hopefully not.
and so
Yeah.
after a while, the family starts to complain. And so I went and I had a bit of a look and like, what can I do to try and curb this? So one is obviously changing your diet. And I was like, okay, that's going to be a bit of a big change. What else can I do that minimizes it a little bit? And so the one thing that popped up that I found quite interesting was drinking peppermint tea.
Okay.
I thought this is a lot of rubbish, This is like one of those people they're trying to sell their product again. But okay, let me give this a try. And I started consuming peppermint tea twice a day for probably about a month. And after that, actually, it slowly subsided, and I don't really have that kind of issue anymore. So again, this is to your point. I don't know if it's because of any other changes that I might have unconsciously made during this, but the main change that I consciously made was I added peppermint tea as a supplement. And so I find it's like there's these things that your parents talk about, or your aunties talk about, or your uncles,
Yeah.
and they oh, if you want this, you should try that. And I find like for myself, I'm very science based. If you want to tell me about something, show me the paper where you got that information from, you got that
Yeah.
evidence from. So when the aunties and uncles come with all of these traditional kind of ways, like, oh, this will help you out, I'm very skeptical. I'm one of those people. Are you sure? This happened for you, or it happened for other people too? But all of these things must have started from somewhere, right?
Yeah.
I've I worked for a community of people, and so
Yeah.
th that's where it started from.
Yeah.
And I find it very interesting how most times we are so quick to pop a pill these days to fix things, rather than looking at these other options that we have, where you can boil arrowroot or all these different weird things that you never think of, because nowadays the conveniency of popping a pill or drinking a powder is
Yeah.
so much easier.
Yeah.
And so I'm quite interested in these kind of things with regards to supplements in general nowadays. rather looking at what's available in this kind of way before popping that pill. And by that pill, I'm not meaning like medication, but the supplement like multivite or whatever else your blood work might be showing you need. So,
Yeah.
so
I think that's not necessarily a bad thing though. So what you just described is the start of what essentially the scientific process essentially is, right? A lot of times um, I think a lot of times people think that the scientific process or the evidence-based process is that I find a paper that supports this thing, then I take this thing.
yeah,
Okay. Again, because supplements in general, supplements are just so non-effective for the most part. Or rather the effect in which they have on the body is actually very, very minimal, unless you have, some allergy or something of that nature, right, to a compound. But it's so minimal that, it's not very risky to take a supplement in the first place, or most supplements in the first place, okay? And the scientific process or scientific method, so to speak, is not about I find a scientific paper to prove my hypothesis. You
yes,
come up with the hypothesis from observation. You observe something. You come up with the hypothesis. Hey, I noticed when I take this thing doesn't have this thing goes away, or this thing, this is the result, right? That I observe commonly. And then you come up with the hypothesis, and then you try to test it out. Like that is the scientific method to things, right? And then that's kind of what they do in the papers in the first place. That's how they develop the papers. And then we can use that as evidence to say like, okay, I think based on these repeatable experiments, and not all papers are created the same. And not all
yes,
experiments are created the same, right? There's some papers where they show you a certain result, but you look at the design of the experiment and everything, you say, oh, okay, there's a lot of flaws in this thing. They didn't control for some of the key things, here. And so that's the process, right? It's a back and forth thing. It's an observational thing into a hypothesis, into like, hey, cool, okay, let me see if I can test this out. And most people, I think, kind of do this to some degree. They're just in a rush to draw that causation aspect of things. So with the peppermint stuff, like peppermint itself or peppermint like oil, usually comes in like a tea oil, the actual extract itself, right? Peppermint itself has certain compounds in them. There's certain antioxidant compounds in them that are very beneficial in general. There are also, I think, like menthol. It's like one of the largest components and constituent compounds, which can be very soothing for like helping with digestive issues as well. So I don't think that there's any issue with you actually kind of trying it out. Like if somebody, so the thing is I feel like if somebody gives you a claim and it's fairly low risk, just give it a shot, see how it goes. Don't get overly invested in it because um we don't really want to like at the end of the day our minds play a large part in these things. So the placebo effect is quite strong. So we don't really want to influence the decision, the outcome prematurely, right? We don't want to say like,
yeah,
oh, this person, is also convinced that it worked for them and all this kind of stuff, and then you end up, like trying to influence the outcome. Either way, right? Like you might be so convinced that it's going to work for them that you expect immediate results, and maybe if you don't get it, you'd be like, oh no, it doesn't work for me. Or you're so convinced by what they say, and then you try a little bit, and your brain's just searching for that comfort and be like, hey, I think I'm passing gas less and stuff. So you have to be like very clear on like, okay, what's the problem you have? What's maybe some way to be able to define it? Like, again, going back with your passing gas example, it's like, okay, in an hour that I'm sitting here, I'm farting like, I don't know, 10 times. Every 6 minutes, I feel like I'm farting, whatever. You count that, right? And then you're like, okay, I take this peppermint tea, and I didn't change any other thing. Or I try to keep everything else as similar as possible. And then now I'm only farting like 5 times. You're like, hey, cool, it's half of that, right? So it seems to be working. Let me try to persist with this. I don't change anything else and see how it goes. I don't change any other thing in my diet. Um, so that's kind of the process I do believe where you kind of figure out what works and what doesn't. And like you said, all these things are steeped in a history, a very rich history of like cultural medicinal use, right? Herbs and medicinal use. And that's kind of where we end up, with some of these supplements in the first place. So there is definitely some efficacy to that because that is how people observe. They say, hey, I draw this kind of a correlation. These things happen, and let me try to put a bit more rigorous testing to it so they can come up with a potential solution to it.
yeah. There's a point that you touched on there that I also want to just emphasize here, and that is the
Yep.
one of scientific papers, right? where you draw a paper to support your narrative rather
Yes.
than look at science to see what is the answer, if that makes sense.
Yes.
There is a bit of a difference between the two.
There's
Uh,
actually a really big difference.
and I find like that is one of the issues that I take with a lot of influencers that we get nowadays, is that they will come with their narrative and then they'll
Yeah.
draw one paper that says this conclusion. Then in their
Yes.
paper's conclusion itself, the authors will say, like, this is not really something to take as a conclusion
Yeah.
because there
Yes.
are 22 other papers that are showing different to this particular paper. So
Yeah.
what it does is it just creates food for thought that perhaps, okay, this is something we can investigate further, is what the
Yeah.
author is claiming in that paper.
Yeah.
But now the influencer has got this paper, omits all of those actual notes by the author, and just says, okay, this supports my narrative, so there's a paper. And this is proves what I'm saying is true. And so
Yeah.
my thing is always is that if you are following any kind of influencers and the influencers always cite particular papers, you might be well served to go and read those papers yourself.
Yeah.
Because just reading a paper is not necessarily always the best option, because you still need to actually interpret the results of that paper correctly. And
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
also takes a skill in itself.
Yeah. To be fair, I don't think many people are actually well versed in this, because there's a reason why people actually go through the whole educative process, right? The whole education process of, like, postgraduate learning, or going to like a graduate level, graduate level, and then a postgraduate level further on, to be even the one conducting their own research and stuff. Because these things are only taught around that research level, for the most part, and you truly get an understanding of it there. Or if you're like me and you read enough of the scientific papers and follow that and all, then you at least have a basic understanding of it. Yeah.
Mm.
But I think most people do not understand how papers work, how experiment design works, and more importantly, actually, I think most people have returned all their knowledge of statistics and probability back to their teachers, right? Because that is a large portion of results in scientific studies, right? What's the significance of this result that you get? What's the p-value of the thing? What's the all these kind of stuff. So you have if you don't even remember those things, it's not going to make a lot of sense. And all you're going to see is the headline of, like, oh, eating tomatoes causes a 40% increase in cancer, cancer risks. But then you realize they only focus on this one very minor compound, and then the 40% cancer risk increase is, like, let's say your cancer risk is the standard cancer risk is only like 1.6% in the average person, average healthy individual, and then a 40% increase is what? Like, what's that? That's another. That's from 1.6 to maybe 2%, So does that mean you're going to eliminate all tomatoes just so that you can save that 0.4%? It's like, doesn't really make sense,
Okay, I think we can probably go on for an entire podcast
Yeah,
episode
yeah.
on this particular thing. So let's jump back to what we started
Yes,
and
yes,
why we're
let's
chatting in
do
this
that.
one. So we looked at the general supplements, but now let's nail it down. If we're looking at those on a fitness or a weight loss journey, what are the kind of supplements that they should be looking at?
Oh, really, really good question. I would say, honestly, this one is the top of everybody's list that stays in Southeast Asia. Protein powder. 100%, you should just get protein powder. I mean, like, all the times that I've gone and traveled around in Southeast Asia, I've always brought along my own protein powder, because getting some sort of protein from eating out and even from convenience stores tends to be quite a big challenge. Because just the nature of the cuisine does not actually use a lot of protein. And you can understand that I talked about this, or I mentioned this briefly before, right? Where you talk about uh the the history of the people in the region,
Yep.
and how, in terms of food and survivability, a lot of it is just agriculturally. They have to grow a lot of plants and stuff like this, and so protein is actually not very abundant, and because of that, it's not a very prioritized nutrient, so to speak. And to some degree, I think maybe if you do grow up with that kind of ancestry, you can actually kind of get away with a bit lesser protein than most people think. But if you're trying to optimize your weight loss fitness journey, you definitely want to bring up the protein amounts. I mean, most people don't eat enough for sure. The average, in fact, most of the clients, especially after the first 3 to 4 days of getting them to record down how much they're eating and stuff, the very first thing we make a change is always, okay, each meal needs to have protein. Let's just start with breakfast first. Let's try to have some protein at breakfast. Most people think, oh, I eat 2 eggs or I eat 1 egg, for breakfast and I've got enough protein in there. That's not enough for sure. And then even worse, like at least some people are trying to eat eggs. Some people just like, oh, I grab this bun from the bakery on the way to work. I have like
It's got some processed meat inside. That's my my protein.
yeah, I grab a plate of like economical bee-hoon, with a chicken wing. Yeah, I got some protein there, right? That kind of thing. So it's like people's concept and understanding of like how much protein actually needs just not the same. So protein powder is going to do you a world of good. It's economical, it's cheap. You don't have to take a lot, just take like 1 scoop, with like you could start off with just like 1 scoop breakfast, 1 scoop dinner, or 1 scoop breakfast, 1 scoop at in between lunch and dinner. And you already like would more or less hit a very good level of protein needs for general weight loss. If you wanted more effectiveness, you should bump that up. Your lunch, your dinner, you try to get a bit more solid protein, a bit more base of like either more fish, more chicken, whatever it is. And then that will balance off really nicely. But I've also had clients that are super busy, and I'll be honest with you, like I tell them, hey, protein powder is if like the most convenient thing you can do is just take more protein powder, then just do that. It's okay. Because the benefit of you losing weight and getting healthier and taking more protein in is going to far outweigh the difference in so-called quality between taking a protein from a protein powder source versus a protein from like a full solid meat source. There'll be people that will tell you, no, you have to get it from like solid food and all that kind of stuff. I say, but like it really depends. It really depends. If it's more convenient for you to take protein powder, please, by all those who are listening to this, please go and take some protein powder. Really.
I mean, I would say I'm a very big proponent for whole foods. So if you can, and if
100%.
your lifestyle
100%.
allows it, try and
Yeah.
fit in as much whole foods as possible. But
Yeah, for sure.
the truth
For
of the
sure.
matter is that with the busyness and everything that we have nowadays, it's very difficult to eat chicken breasts 4 times a day, or
Yeah.
whatever your thing is that you're getting your protein from. So
Yeah.
protein powders, yes, it does come in and make life a lot easier for you, and as you say, more economical too.
Yeah. I think the economy of things is always going to be a huge factor. At the end of the day, it's like you want to make sure that it is sustainable enough for you to consistently eat a diet that's rich in protein.
Yep.
You also want to make sure that it's convenient enough that you'll be able to eat a diet rich in protein. Most people do not automatically gravitate towards protein, especially ladies. I notice in terms of personal palate, for a lot of ladies that I have trained, many of them don't even like to eat protein. Like they don't enjoy a steak, they don't enjoy a piece of chicken, they don't enjoy any kind of fish or meat or whatever, right? Most ladies, again, I'm probably generalizing here, but this is just purely from my experience working with them. Yeah, a lot of them like, oh, I love carbs, and most people like, I love carbs, I love desserts, I love all that kind of stuff, and it's like, okay, that's great, right? But if you're talking about taking charge of your nutrition, we have to have those, but we also need to make sure we're getting enough protein in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what else would you say then? Protein powder, and then after that?
Protein powder. So if you're working out for fitness wise, if you're lifting weights, I do think getting some creatine in would be very, very beneficial. Creatine is probably one of those that it's like the most studied. I believe it's probably the most studied fitness supplement there is. And here's the thing, okay, let me give you the cliff notes on this. Creatine, as like if you want to buy a creatine supplement, number one, probably just get a powder, or you can get the capsules if you want to. Just make sure on the ingredients list it says creatine monohydrate. There's tons and tons of different type of creatine sources. They have creatine ethyl esters, they have creatine phosphate esters, things like this, where they try to make it seem and they market it as like this thing is going to be so much quicker to absorb in your system and all that kind of stuff. That's all just marketing spiel to be able to charge a higher price for creatine. Creatine monohydrate, that is good enough. And it's been proven time and time again. So that's the key thing. Buy the cheapest that you can find. Creatine manufacturing isn't very intensive. isn't very labor intensive. So that's why it's actually relatively cheap to produce. Yeah. So that's the thing there, right? So save as much money as you can. Just buy whatever is the cheapest creatine you can find that says creatine monohydrate as the main ingredient. And then the other thing about creatine is that, okay, so what does creatine do in the first place, right? From a fitness perspective, it basically just gives you that little bit of extra energy boost so you can get maybe 1 or 2 more reps. Like that's about it, right? So that it basically tops up your creatine in stores in your body, in the muscles. And so when you go to lift weights and stuff in the initial first 10 to 15 seconds, that's where your body utilizes majority of the energy from this ATP, creatine phosphate ATP system, to be able to contract, provide the energy that your body needs. And so if you saturate the muscle stores with that, what's going to happen is that you can really fully maximize, that energy from the creatine system where it generates all the ATP your body needs for that initial lifting of the heavy weights. So it gives you that little bit extra 1 or 2 reps. But that's honestly about it in terms of the fitness component of things. But in the grand scheme of things, it does make a difference because if you are consistently getting, that little bit of extra performance edge every session, over time, that's going to compound into a lot more.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of what creatine does.
Right.
But there's some health benefits as well in terms of brain and cognitive function. I think that's the next major step up that they found in that people that actually take creatine, they found that the cognitive function tends to improve. And also there is some evidence to state that it could help hold off a little bit against potential like brain dysfunctions leading to dementia cases, development of Alzheimer's, things like this. Yeah,
Okay.
improved memory. I think that's one of the things that has been stated. Again, it's not a night or day thing. You suddenly take creatine now, and you suddenly your memory is like full of photographic or something. But
Right, I
it's
think
one of
these
those things
two
where,
are two that maybe we can also do future episodes. We can expand quite vastly on them.
oh yes, yeah. I believe we
Yeah.
will definitely do it. Yeah.
So if we were to look at now, is like, are there any other supplements that you would recommend for people on a fitness or weight loss journey?
Uh, Honestly, these are the two you probably want to spend your money on. There's nothing else you really need to get.
That's giving you bang for
Um,
buck.
yeah, that's really giving you bang for buck. Are there any that you think you have been having questions about?
Actually not really. Because those are the only two that I've really given any weight to. I mean, I've tried
I,
many other
there,
different
there,
things
there are
like
some that.
BCAAs and all that kind of stuff, but I found is like
Oh yeah.
that there's not much to it unless I'm like a competitive, really going at it.
Hmm.
For a person who's just doing this for healthy living
In
and
general fitness, yeah.
yeah, general fitness, I don't find that there's anything more to go for other than just protein powder. Really, just protein powder if you're not getting enough protein in.
Yeah.
Creatine is like a supplement to the supplement for me when I look at it, because when you're looking at
Hmm.
just general fitness, I would say it's not one of my priorities that I would look at.
Yeah.
Why
Oh,
protein?
one.
Yes, it is. But
Yeah. One thing.
if I'm like training for something,
Yes.
like if there's a race I want to go for, or there's like specific competition I want to go for, yes, then I'll bring creatine back into the mix.
Yeah, I mean, definitely fair enough. One thing to consider is this also. You get tons of creatine from eating meat anyway.
Hmm.
So if you're already like if you have lunch and dinner, and you have a decent amount of, steak or chicken or any kind of other animal meats in there, you're probably getting enough creatine as it is. You don't really need to supplement too much extra. And then the other one I just wanted to quickly point out is you're totally right. I think just sticking with protein powder and creatine, even for somebody like myself, like I'm doing competitive bodybuilding, but I don't take anything beyond creatine and like protein powder as well. You
Okay.
know, yeah, and it's not like because I think I'm elite or I want to have this like additional, I don't know, a moralistic grounds of like I want to stay super natty or whatever, like there's nothing to do with that at all. It's just that so many of these other supplementations just don't seem to have any real concrete effect. Pre-workout supplements, I would say most people like I just have a coffee, and if it's later in the day, I just put on a song and I go to the gym. Leading up to the gym, I just visualize my workout, what I want to do, and that's good enough for me. Like I don't really need like a pre-workout for myself, or I've trained myself off pre-workout. And then stuff like BCAAs, I think that one's already been proven to be very redundant. It's like adding more water to your water. So I'm already taking water, and then let me drink this extra water so that I can get more water. It's like it doesn't quite make sense.
I think this also brings up a good idea for another podcast as well. One where
Oh
we
yeah,
can
for sure.
talk about the
For
debunking of a lot of the the different ones that people are
sure.
marketing towards. Yes.
I think the takeaway from this is just focus on your protein powder. That's going to be really really solid. And then the BCAAs, sorry, the creatine, add it in if you are consistent enough and you really want to take your performance up just another level, but a very small little level additional.
Awesome. All right. So I think we might have covered this actually, but if we had to just give like a quick review, what are the benefits and the drawbacks one can experience taking supplements?
I think the benefits of supplements again goes back to that insurance policy component of things, and like for example for protein powder, it'll be more to do with making sure you're able to hit your targets very conveniently, right? So that's one major thing, because convenience equals higher adherence. If it's very convenient, you're more likely to stick with it, and
Mm.
you're more likely to do it, which is what will get you the results. The consistency is what gets you the results. And for all these other supplements that we talked about, we're taking something like magnesium, taking all the vitamin D, calcium, multivitamins, all the other stuff we talked about, fish oils. All these things, they are not a night and day difference. It's not like you take it and instantly you feel better. Not even from like 1 week to the next week. Potentially it's something where you take consistently for a month, and then you start to notice like, hey, I feel a bit more energetic. I feel better. So it's a bit of a slow burn in that sense. And in terms of the benefits of this, I would say the really outright tangible benefits, you get the reassurance that, hey, I've already done what I can to ensure I top up additionally, that little insurance policy. So it's like an insurance policy. I think that's the best way to analogize it. You don't really see the benefits of an insurance policy unless it comes to light, but you also don't really want it to come to light because that means something terrible has happened, right? So you just keep taking it just because it keeps you topped off. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. So I think we've covered pretty much everything there.
Yeah.
Is there anything you would add in closing or?
I think just some final words with this for supplementation in general. It's just, of course, we always have to add this in, right? Like make sure you consult the doctor
Yeah.
first, because if you're taking special medication, there are some supplements, especially herbal supplements, that could potentially have some sort of interference effect. It might be something as mild as just preventing the absorption of the specific medication you're trying to take in. Or it could be even something even worse, where it kind of interacts with the medication you're taking and becomes, extremely dysfunctional for your system. The other part to this also is something very important here is when you see a supplement, okay, look at the nutrition label and see whether or not they use the word proprietary blend. Okay, if a supplement uses the words proprietary blend, don't buy the supplement. The
Good
reason
point.
why is because, yeah, proprietary blend is just a very nice, fancy way to hide the fact that they don't have to show or write down specifically what is in the supplement in terms of the values and the numbers and the amounts of the ingredients. So oftentimes what happens is companies that want to make a bigger buck, increase their margins, they will use the word proprietary blend, and they will severely underdose their supplements. And because again, supplementation doesn't have a night and day effect, it's a lot to do with the placebo impact that it has on a person. It doesn't really matter. All you're doing is just wasting the money, and you're just buying like the hyped up marketing for it. So just avoid that, yeah. But I think that's about it. Don't relate so much on supplements. make sure you eat proper food for the most part. If you're getting enough fruits and veg, don't be one of those people that says, "Oh, I'll take a greens powder and I don't have to eat my vegetables." It's like, nah, don't do that. Just eat your fruits and veg, and then take a multivitamin and top up the rest of the vitamin stores.
Awesome. So I think I'll just echo you, and I'll say is that we must always remember that supplements can be a helpful tool, but they're not a replacement for a balanced diet, and
100%.
obviously for regular exercise. But again, like you said, always consult with your healthcare provider before starting any supplement regime to make sure there's no kind of regimen to make sure that there's no conflict with any kind of medication that you're taking. And then
Yes.
I think that's it. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. And if you found this episode helpful, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to leave us a comment if you can, because we'd love to hear your thoughts and your feedback. And until next time, stay healthy and keep moving.